Greetings from the far side of the galaxy. I'm Fury, your host the most with a brand new time machine. Why do I have one, you ask? Well, because I forgot that last Sunday was Father's Day, and if I knew that, you would have gotten this video last week and the Pride video this week. Because I'm going back to do this video in time, if I see a single one of you saying I did this late in the comments, it's on site. All I have to do is hit this button here and... there we go. Now let's get this video started. The first Housamo dad we have today is Shino. Oh, by the way, spoilers for basically all of Housamo. Shino is from one of the longest works of Japanese literature, if not the longest, the Hakenden. The story begins with the feudal lord lamenting the state of the war, making a joke to the family dog. He tells the dog that if he can bring him the head of his enemy, then he will give him the hand of his daughter. Sometime later, much to everyone's shock and dismay, the family dog drops his enemy's head at his lord's feet. His lord doesn't want his daughter to leave, but the princess forces him to keep his word by eloping with the dog into the night. The story, or well, book 1, because it is very long, ends with one of the lord's retainers accidentally shooting both the princess and the dog dead. The necklace the princess was wearing breaks and the orbs fly off into the night to reincarnate into the actual protagonist the story is named after, the Akenshi, the 8-dog warriors. It's kind of wild that Housamo's interpretation of the story is less weird than the actual thing. Shino, or as we learn right before he fades away, Yatsufusa, is a fan favorite character in Housamo for a good reason. His role in the story is very good, acting as a guide for two other fan favorites, Moritaka and Tadatomo. But despite how often Shino shows up and his prevalence, I still feel that he's underutilized. He hasn't really interacted with any of the Akenshi aside from Moritaka and Tadatomo, which is a huge wasted opportunity. Talk about parents playing favorites. I'm willing to excuse that because there's definitely something building in the main quest, but what I can't excuse is his lack of interaction with Ellie. While she is listed as disliking him, we know it's superficial. We literally see her mourn his death, and then she goes on a literal Hakenshi quest all across Tokyo. We already got Kresnik. I want to see Shino being Ellie's cringe boomer dad, damn it. Housamo may be ignoring him, but I sure won't, cause up next is Ophion. In the myths, Ophion was one of two creator deities alongside his wife, Eurynomé, and depending on some interpretations, he was also one of Eurynomé's creations. Together, they created Olympus. How did they do that, you ask? Well, they literally did the nasty and popped out an egg. Mythology is so weird sometimes. Although, just as it happened in Housamo, they lost to Kronos and Rhea, who threw them into the depths of Oceanus. I know it was short, but that's pretty much the entirety of Ophion's myth, so I guess we're going to the one in Housamo now. The one in Housamo likely had two children that we know of. The first would be the Titan Kronos, and the second would be Eurynomé's adoptive son, Hephaestus. However, I said it's likely that Ophion had two children because both of them are in an odd spot in Housamo's lore. Just like Housamo with Fenrir and Hati, it's never really acknowledged that Ophion has any children. According to the timeline of events, Ophion and Hephaestus should know each other. They were both in Olympus when Eurynomé got exiled. And yet, we never see Ophion, either young or old, ever mention Hephaestus. And Kronos is in an even weirder spot. In all of Housamo's 6 years of existence, Kronos is only mentioned once. And it's in a single line from Christmas Showdown, where they don't even mention Kronos directly. They say Kronos' bloodline. When doing research for this video, I had to actually go back and make sure that he exists in Housamo. That's how little he is mentioned. And don't even get me started on whatever the fuck this thing is. It has a scythe and the ability to affect time. Like, come on. That's like Kronos, right? Not only is this thing never actually called Kronos, It's a robot! Are you really trying to tell me that your enemy popped a robot out of her hooch? Then again, she and Ophion did the same thing with a world, so you know what? Maybe she did. I genuinely have no idea what to make of this situation, so I'm just going to throw my hands up in the air and move on. Right now, we're about halfway through the video, so let me ask that you please like and subscribe and donate to my Ko-fi and Patreon. Also, I live stream Monday and Friday, so do be sure to check those out too. Let's get back into things with one of the new guys, Loki. Starting with his myths, he's of course based on the Norse god of the same name. The version we see in Housamo is based on the accounts from the Poetic and Prose Edda, which tells us about the death of the god Balder. When Balder was born, his mother went around making all things in the world promise not to harm him, but Loki stole away one plant so a bargain couldn't be struck. That plant being the Devil's Fugue, a fancy name for mistletoe. Much later, when Balder was showing off his immortality, Loki convinced Hother to throw a bundle of it at the guy, killing him instantly. For this, Odin chained Loki to a rock and hung a poisonous snake over his head, explaining why Loki is strapped down in Housamo, and that weird purple gunk on his face. You'd think he'd get someone to wash it off, but no, apparently he just likes it there. I know I mentioned this in another video, hint hint, click here to watch it, but he has 3 kids all in Tokyo. There's Fenrir, who works with the Beast Tamers, Jormungandr, who kinda sorta works with the Game Masters, it's complicated. And we learn from one of Jormungandr's lines that Loki's daughter, Hel, has already been summoned. Apparently, Hel's a neat hikikimori, so that's cool. Hosamo's already got a cringe-fail queen, they just need to actually reveal her. I genuinely don't have much to say about Loki, mostly because I haven't gotten to reading a translation of chapter 14, but I'll get there. I do know he ends up messing with Oscar, and he's got my full support on that. Remember kids, a man is not only right to bully a theater kid, he is obligated to do so. A good follow-up for Loki is Loki's son Fenrir and his son Hati. In the myths, Fenrir was one of Loki's 3 problem children, and this one in particular was fated to be the death of Odin. The gods, understandably not too keen on that, decide to try and bind Fenrir. The first 2 binds fail, but Fenrir gets suspicious of the 3rd. He'll only put it on if one of the gods, Tyr, puts his arm in his mouth, and things play out exactly how you expect. Tyr loses his arm, and the 3rd binding does work, but only for so long, as he would escape during Ragnarok and fulfill his destiny. It's wild that Fenrir and Hati haven't even shared a room together despite being 2 of the oldest characters in the game. Like, to the extent that Housamo ignores their relation, they also seem to subtly acknowledge it. You ever actually stop and notice how similar Hati and Fenrir are? They both have these stoic, serious outer shells, but it's quite easy to get them riled up and acting weird. They both cross their arms in their neutral pose, something no other characters do, aside from Loki. Maybe crossing your arms is a genetic trait in Tokyo. The next Housamo dad we're covering is Azathoth. Azathoth is of course based on the Lovecraftian god. In Lovecraftian lore, Azathoth is the progenitor, the one all things come from. For all of reality is merely Azathoth's dream, and countless lesser gods bang their drums and play their flutes to keep him asleep. 'Cause if he ever wakes up, his dream, our reality, just ends. I'll save analyzing the other accuracies for later, but Housamo does confirm that Azathoth is basically the father of every old one. So I guess Azathoth has the most family members who are playable characters in Housamo. Sorry Loki, you lost by technicality. I do find the implication of Azathoth to be a good one that I'm glad Housamo explores at least a little bit through Nyarlathotep. We learn through the Oh My Popstar Akashic record that Nyarlathotep's role is to be the messenger for Azathoth, a hype man. Azathoth, being the blind idiot god, is aloof to most everything, basically dooming all of his children to an eternity of neglect. Yet, despite that, Nyarlathotep still desires for that parental affection that will never come. And why Maria forgives him, because despite Nyarlathotep's actions putting the guild at risk, they were still motivated by love. He betrayed the missionaries' trust, not their ideals. Finally, the pop star Akashic Record mentions that now that Azathoth has left Tokyo, Nyarlathotep has an opportunity to explore himself in ways he couldn't before. Hopefully, it's something we get in chapters 15 or 16, or maybe it's already in chapter 14. I wouldn't know, still haven't read it. Now it's time for some honorable mentions I couldn't make fit into the video. First up, Citri's dad. A moment of silence to the fact that we'll never see this dilfed up version of Citri thanks to his son taking his ruling role in Tokyo. And an honorable mention to all of Zurong's dads. Honestly, we should probably do something about that before he collects all the Infinity dads and becomes unstoppable. And now but not least, we have the one, the only Horikyu Kamui. As for the myths, Horikyu Kamui isn't based on any particular god. Rather, he comes from the animistic Ainu religion, which worships the natural world. Horikyu Kamui is likely based on the now extinct Tokaido wolf. Horikyu Kamui literally means howling god. There does seem to be some influence from one specific Horikyu Kamui, Rataru Seto, who's said to be the ancestor of the Ainu people. Moving on to his in-game counterpart, I feel like I should clarify something. I often say that Horikyu Kamui is basic, but that doesn't mean I don't think his story is interesting. He was essentially a hero farmer, raising children to be slaughtered for his world system, which is interesting. When I say he's boring, I mean that he's the lowest common denominator husbando. There's nothing particularly offensive about him that could turn people off. He's not a war criminal like Tezcatlipoca, one of your teachers like Shinong, or Daikoku. He's the generic safe bet. If Lifehunters wanted to make Horikyu Kamui more interesting, they could lean into the trauma of him having a litany of dead kids behind him. Show him being uncomfortable with the idea of kids or even being around the younger characters. Just give some dysfunction to this walking pile of oatmeal. And this is where I'm ending the video, but not before I do the Patreon shoutouts. For our 3 stars, we have special thanks to 87 Werehog, Deku, Zora Chow, Tron, Garon Lefay, Dragon King Yara, Anon RC, Lightning Shadow, and Kayun. For 4 stars, we have Miki Moon, the leader of the Yiga clan. And for our Super D-Tuber special 5-star shoutouts, we have first Vanilla Flower, the ambusher of Mifa Court. Then Poor Mage, rising from Death Mountain's crater. Next, Sky King 64, the Demon King's phantom saboteur. And finally, Mahagasaur, the Draconic Demon King. Thank you for watching, be sure to like and subscribe. As always, this is Joe's Fury signing out.